Jameson, can I start? Can I start? Okay. Okay, everyone, thank you very much. So we were the workshop group number one. Uh, yeah, thank you. Totally undeserved. So our group workshop was on legal hacking law practice. We split in three different subgroups, small groups. The first one was led by James. Thank you, James. The second one was led by Warren. Thank you, Warren. And the third one by Oscar. Thank you, Oscar. They tackled three different topics for the next generation of law firms. First of all, the governance and structure and business models. Second one, the application of legal technology. And third one, the compliance with sustainability. Eventually, we drafted a decalogue in 16 points, which is awkward, with a suggestion on how the next generation of law firm should be, and some suggestion to be followed. Jameson, how much time do I have here? 20 minutes. Ah, okay, fine. Okay, great. Okay. So basically, we have identified 16 points. I'm not going to read them all, otherwise we would not have time to discuss. So basically, with reference to the structure, we identified that also the corporate ownership can be a possibility for a law firm if for cases in which scalability or process-driven services are sought. So we believe that the corporate structure is best suited for this specific case. The next generation of law firms should also consider to appoint non-lawyers manager, because apparently that type of person would be more suited to manage tools, workflows, etc. The law firm should adopt different types of billable mechanisms, not only the hourly fee. These may vary from case to case, from situation to situation, from client to client. Also taking into consideration the sustainability for the professionals delivering the services, that should be taken into consideration as well. Legal tech should be embraced as an opportunity, should not be feared, should not be considered a competitor. Associates should be granted different career paths, and also the compensation and benefit should be focused on wellness and mental health. There should be a genuine diversity, equity, and inclusion commitment. The law firm should evaluate associates' performance on sustainability indicators metrics, and the law firm should consider appointing a chief sustainability officer in addition to a chief financial officer and chief operating officer. And eventually we identified a process for the application of legal tech solutions, starting with empathize with the current state and obstacles, stakeholders, and problem identification in the budget. Then there should be an identification of the problem and design the prototype solutions and the testing phase for feedback. Thank you. If you have questions, comments, we are ready here. Okay, this is a point that we have been discussing before with Oscar. This document right now is not ready to be shared, but if we want to render this document a public document, we should work some hours more in order to draft an introduction and to refine a bit the consistency of the 16 points, because maybe it is possible to merge 2-3 of them, and then it could be possible to divulge this document if all of you agree, of course.
What timeline do you think?
Um, I think it depends on the methodology. If I can do this by myself, 10 days. If we need to have a longer process, and maybe it's better, then we need to have several steps of checks, etc. Maybe 1 month and a half.
I think it'd be really cool to have that, like by the end of the year, have like a really core set of principles tied to some sort of mark, or something like we were talking about before, and then have maybe your firms be some of the inaugural firms to sign on to those principles, and then pick off other firms that could potentially join as well, and really build something around that. I think that the first and easiest step is to have a list of 16 things to do, but kind of the more bold, actionable thing is to commit yourselves to those, and then try to get others, onto the cause. Okay. What do you think?
I think that Oscar and myself are ready to do this, because we are already doing this, so yeah, it's fine.
Great. Okay, very cool. Any other questions about the principles? Is anything missing from the list? What do you think?
Please.
Yeah, Phil. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. So, well, we were talking about a commitment, not a committee, actually. Oscar, can I ask you help on this? Because this is one of your points, if you want to elaborate.
Yes, actually, we have to build on that, because it's more than a committee; it's a commitment. So we have to develop on that. But one of the things that we were talking is how we can make this commitment both ways. No, either by I heard there was in our table there was a comment on a sort of consortium that is being formed by companies, by in-house lawyers that won't be hiring law firms that don't comply with certain requirements, and that's a great point to start. But also, it will be great if law firms can also demand that from their clients. It's more difficult, but it's also it can be like both ways, no? But yeah, we have to work on that a little bit more.
No?
Phil?
No. Oh, hi. So one of your points was on embracing legal tech and not viewing it as a competitor. Did you talk a bit about what legal tech is and the bounds of that? What does legal tech mean in this context?
In this context is the use of technology to improve legal services, and so this means increase efficiency of these services. But Warren, this is the point that you tackle in your small group, if you want to add something.
So we didn't entirely just talk about it at a definitional perspective, because we were also talking a fair amount about not just thinking about, say, software products or things that are marketed specifically around the general idea of legal tech that is commonly and commercially funded right now. But we were also talking about process improvements and really modernization overall. So I think, we used legal tech as sort of a framework for implementing something that is big and changing and improving something overall, but not necessarily being totally constrained with it. So we had as is totally unusual for an event like this, we went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and we started talking a fair amount about what that looks like and what your trade-offs are and how you actually, a thing that I say a lot about this is that if it were easy to do, then we wouldn't keep having conversations about it, obviously, and making these changes actually does come with costs and trade-offs and having to make smart decisions. So, but we did go into a fair degree of detail about it. There are a bunch of sticky notes over there that talk about that even more at very high levels, but also still trying to set some frameworks around it. But that is a long-winded way of answering your question, which is that ultimately we were talking about more probably than just the traditional idea of legal tech, and maybe legal tech and sort of the idea of a conference like this, of legal change and, you know, big picture kind of improvements overall, often which has to use tech.
Sure. Well, one follow-up. So how about AI tech that replaces law firms?
Let's look.
Well, let's look forward 10 years, right, folks?
Yeah.
Okay. So we're looking at look at like a do not pay, for instance. So tech that actually does a lawyer's job for them. Any thoughts on that?
Do you want to go? You want to go with that?
Yeah, of course. My personal view is that if we can be substituted by software, it means that that job does not have any kind of added value, and so we need to do something better, something that a software cannot do. So in my personal opinion, it's not an issue.
And I guess I'd supplement that a little bit with just saying that I think the way I might have written it in one of the notes that we had was that should some lawyers worry about it? Probably, but probably not many of the folks in this room, at least, because again, we are generally looking to find, again, things that probably can't be automated that easily. To the extent from like personal experience that I've seen the use of AI to this point, I haven't seen it as a huge threat. Doesn't mean that it won't be, obviously, and I think, again, everyone here probably wants to keep an eye on it, but definitely can obviously make things, improve things, and also then open us up for potentially doing different or varied work that we haven't done before.
Sure.
Just to add a little practical perspective from where I'm coming from. So my firm is a wholly owned firm of LegalZoom, and interestingly to many people, one of the 3 strategic pillars of growth for LegalZoom is incorporating professional advice. So it's actually bringing lawyers back into the process rather than trying to remove them from the process. And I see a lot more of that coming in the not so distant future. Maybe the future that could be different. We sort of constrained ourselves to near-term reality in our conversation, so we didn't get too deep into the AI talk.
And please. Sure.
Hey, so I'm sorry if I missed this, but I have a question actually about legal process, and at what point does your statement of recommendations also include a change in what point the lawyers get involved in a business process or business evaluation? I mean, I was inspired a lot by our Mexican colleague who brought her students into the factory to be partners with the factory, actually help lead innovation in the factory. And I know this has been a big topic of discussion at JP Morgan where I was, about how lawyers can actually embed themselves early in the innovation process around financial products. And I was wondering if that's part of the statement that needs to go out to other law firms.
Yeah, I think that this topic was partially addressed by the subgroup number 1. The main point that we raise is that lawyers should hire non-lawyers to address more pure managerial activity. But I think that, James, you want to add something here?
So the way we discussed this was a couple different looks at process, and we were talking more about kind of business process management, so how the work flows within a firm. The way we discussed it was there are good people with expertise who are not lawyers who are really well suited for developing processes, but firms should, as a general matter, have a subject matter expert in the room, that being a lawyer who practices in the area to help inform how those processes are developed, because developing without that input is extremely difficult to come up with a good process, actually. So we kind of looked at it as the driver of process improvement should be someone with expertise in process improvement, and the sort of contributor and input roles for that should come from lawyers with subject matter expertise.
Does it?
Yeah. Integrating into products that are offered to consumers. And then we do happen to have an Arizona LLC that's licensed as an ABS to provide that service. Yeah, so both. All of the above.
Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the people that were part of my workshop. Thank you very much, everyone.
We can just start off from the beginning. Oh wait, that's all. Not technical difficulties. Alrighty. Yeah. I think we're good. Yeah. Okay. Hi. Hi, my name's Asosa. I am a law student. I am in 3L NYU. I was cordially invited today to just be a part of this, and this is me being a part of this. And I'm happy to be your guest, your legal hackathon. So anyways, yeah, we're the social impact group, and we started talking about the war in the Ukraine right now, which, as we know, is a very devastating situation, and trying to figure out how we can plug in. But that came with a really great bouncing point for us to talk about how do we, as legal hackers, more generally respond to the oncoming crises that we're going to see in the future. So as we were discussing this, and thank you so much, Laura, and throughout bringing like this input and flow of information on the issue, a bunch of problems came up to like the process of how do we like factor in as volunteers. And it came in at first as these two large buckets. We were like communication and capacity, which we broke down into even further activities, which is what is the problem, surveying the problem accurately, communicating the problem like accurately out to the group at a larger number, creating knowledge, which is something that everyone here is great at doing. That's not an actual problem, but as a part of this process of having knowledge stewardship. So how do we keep, retain, and sustain knowledge amongst ourselves? How do we communicate knowledge between ourselves? And then the reason why I broke it down to such small details, because you think about if you're making an API, each one of these tasks is a separate miniature task within a program. It's kind of different. The data you're working with is different, and what you should be asking yourself is different. So generating incentive for the volunteers and people in this room to come onto issues and being able to work effectively, have their responsibility honored, and have their time honored as well, and apply the knowledge that we have created thus far as a group together to the issues at hand. This STEP model, by the way, is a logic model, which is the program plan logic model. You can actually find it if you Google it. It's one comes up here as problems, activities, needs, resources, etc. So we broke this down even further. So we have these activities, right? These is what we felt we would need to do to, as in line with the mission of like teaching and sharing knowledge at Legal Hackers, to resolve and help and fit in and find a role within the Ukrainian crisis. However, we didn't feel comfortable doing it just as this. Like, you can't just take these phrases and like hand it to a lawyer and be like, survey the problem. They'll be like, how? So we were like, what are some more miniature questions we can like tackle? Like, what do we need to feel comfortable addressing these issues as attorneys, as networkers, as doers, etc., on this issue? And my team here was so wonderful. I'm making a bunch of post-it notes and putting all their needs and being completely honest and asking the really big picture questions on that, which we turned into first deliverables. But after reassessing this and thinking about it a bit more often, we found that one of the things that really connected this group was this human element and a natural need to communicate and be in connection and community and interact with one another. And while we are legal hackers, so like a legal tech group, automation actually wasn't the answer in this case. And funny enough, sustainability was the issue in this case. So to figure out how to have better social impact, a scalable social impact, we realized that what we really just needed was knowledge management and a knowledge manager. So a individual or person, a human actually at the end of the day, which the processing capabilities of a questionnaire, of Slack and a repository of a Wikipedia page, etc., to keep track of all the things that are happening on the chapters when it comes to these issues, to help us also keep track of the skill sets that people have to bring to issues such as like crises in Ukraine, crises in Syria, Somalia, etc. Be able to share that on a regular basis with the larger group and evaluate and make sure that we're being successful in the efforts that we're doing in these projects. So to come to actual next steps before Dempsey asks me, we felt that we could start off by asking, do we all want to use Slack? Do we all want to be on one big Slack? Should we make channels and what would that look like? Or should we use a different type of platform to connect with each other? And then secondly, we could start off by surveying what projects are being done by the chapters currently so we can have like some type of lists or knowledge of what's happening, or even more so, have a registry of the skill sets that we all have in this room, because people are so varied and bringing so much to the table, and it's more so a question of knowing what we have in the room versus finding it elsewhere. So that's us summarizing all of this down into a couple of minutes of chatting. But yeah.
At the end of the day, to meet these perceived needs, we came up with a whole bunch of ideas, but we don't also want to reinvent the wheel of what the people who are the global legal hacker organizers have already done. So we need to coordinate with them about what they've done and what the pain points have been, why certain approaches have failed. So our immediate deliverable is that we have a working group which has agreed to give 2 hours over the next 2 months, and I have a list of people here that are going to workshop these ideas further, as well as have some conversations with the founders to think about how we could increase our communication between chapters and create a more robust communications infrastructure. And we have a lot of ideas to go through, pros and cons with that, but we need to bring in more opinions and we need to have some more time to work on it. So if anybody's interested in increasing inter-chapter communication and in creating repositories for knowledge so that people can discover knowledge and discover expertise across chapters, if you have good ideas or you're interested in that problem, sign up here and we're all going to continue the conversation and hopefully produce a document full of suggestions for the global organization sometime in the next quarter.
Thank you. Is there any questions for us in our team, or? Sure.
Can everyone hear me? Oh,
Yes.
yes, and too much. I love this work, and thank you all very much for doing this. I have to say that when Laura and I were talking about this, I had in the back of my head actually something that Jonathan has been saying now for years, and I think it was on the occasion of it might have been the 10th anniversary like Zoom we did or something along those lines, which was the idea of legal rapid response. And it's something that you said again and again. It happened after the travel ban in 2016 or 2017, I guess early 2017. Happened in COVID. It happened again with the war against Ukraine. It keeps happening again and again and again, and we're all scrambling as a global appreciate this work and the focus on having knowledge managers, making sure the knowledge is there, making sure the tools are there, the resources are available, that they're free and accessible for people to use. And one thing I'd love to add just on top of that, looking at Jack Cushman, is what extent can we leverage libraries that have been stewards of this knowledge information? They have all the skills, the resources. We don't need to reinvent those wheels for sure. So how can we look to programs like Lil to find out ways to solve these problems?
We already have him on our
Great. Oh, you're just not standing there. Sweet. This is amazing. So no questions, just a congratulations. Thank you for doing all of this great work, and I hope that we can realize what I view as Jonathan's dream that I'm once again trying to channel for Legal Rapid Response so that the next crisis we're not on the back foot again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for listening.
Any other questions? Any other questions, comments, things we should take into consideration? Wonderful. Thank you. Okay. Group number 3. Who's going to get up?
We are a group of Hacking Legal Education, awesome team that worked on some interesting ideas and solutions together. I'll just make an introduction and then I'll request some of the members to put specific inputs. We had a lot of conversation, I should just say. And members were really interested in conversation and exchanging different thoughts and ideas. And what we can do together, I think there is some thought that is also happening, and Nikki will talk about this. I'll just give an overview and then off to all of you. There were 2 or 3 main strands. One was about curriculum and hacking the curriculum. Second one was about bringing the industry and external perspective into legal education, and then online repository or something that can be created around open source was also mentioned, and we had a discussion on this. And then collaboration and how egos can be melted away a little bit, and universities and lawyers and different stakeholders that can come together to really make a change, especially for empowering students and also developing soft skill and bringing people into the triangle win, which I think best mentioned by Kat, because she really made a fantastic diagram on the blackboard. So Kat, off to you. Or
So I'd much rather listen to all the amazing people who participated in this conversation. I will say that by common agreement, we talked, brainstormed more than working on sort of a focused output. And I think we had some really fantastic conversation, and I know ideas were definitely triggered for me. And so there was a lot of learning that happened in the room, which I value highly. And we do have notes. And so I'm passing the mic to a note holder.
All right. So I don't want to really plug it in just because I don't want to mess with the Zoom that kind of situation. But I think we can kind of verbalize the notes that we took today. So basically we kind of framed a lot of discussion around 2 main questions. One was, what should a class ought to be? And then how do we convince the stakeholders? How do we give buy-in to the people who can make that happen? Because unlike a lot of law firms, we work with institutions who have administrations, right? And then within the what the class ought to be, there was 2 sub-questions. One was access to justice issues, right? How can we make things a lot more alternative than to the normal law school, curricula or the classes that we have? Because what we're dealing with is a lot of preset doctrinal issues that we have to, teach. So if there's any kind of things that have to be, more adaptive or more unorthodox, isn't it elective classes? and try to convince that to not only the faculty and administration, but students and outside organizations as well. And then, basically because we've been teaching like remotely or in person for the last 3 years, there's a lot of like, not like a division, but different ideas on what's important for a legal tech class should be, right? Whether that be a communications standpoint between the students and like, the clients, if they do client work, or they're, professors, or if they do something like what software is most important. What else am I missing in that?
We also talked about the skills, the profile of this new lawyer, right, or the students that will be having this profile. We talked about several skills. We talked about the skills of legal design. We talked about also having more argumentative skills, critical thinking, right, and also communication towards the client. Sometimes they do not know how to ask the right questions, right, or how to approach to them. I share also with them that one of my kids said, but how do I tell him that the Tio is messing up with him, right? And so I had to, talk to them, coach them a little bit, and we talked about this new profile. What were the skills, the cognitive skills, the managerial leadership skills that they need? Miguel also gave a really important question in the table. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Thank you all. You were in it, debating. So a couple of my ideas were like, what if we shifted the power out of law schools and created separate entities that would be more focused on value creation with, sub-industries that have specifically performed value in various places in the profession. If you think about like legal ops, if you think about, innovation departments in law firms, or just developers of technology to supply legal services, a lot of those folks don't necessarily practice law, but a lot of them went through legal education and invested in a legal education. With all the advances in education, period, from the competency-based online learning to community-based online learning and other forms of models, like greatly reducing the cost, packaging it up, and having like these connections to employers to have that streamlined value, really create competition against law school. Law school has no competition at the moment. So a bit more radical, but
we encourage radical. So I'll build on that really quickly. So one idea we floated, you all are probably aware, in the US there is now a model for challenging regulation sandboxes. So Utah has a sandbox. Arizona didn't do a sandbox. They just did away with 5.4, and now entities like LegalZoom can deliver legal services. So we floated the idea, what if we had a sandbox for a new model for a law school? And so, which would be still regulated by the ABA, just as sandbox entities in Utah are regulated by the Utah Supreme Court to deliver legal services, but it would test a new model or new models for training lawyers for the 21st century instead of for the fourth industrial revolution instead of for the second industrial revolution. Because, so I'm sure you're all aware, in the US and I think other jurisdictions around the world, our models for educating lawyers are more than 100 years old. And the world looks very different than when we created the model. So I'm personally very excited about the sandbox, and I think that there are folks here who would like to jump in. And I just learned I'm going to have a new neighbor in Tennessee, so she's moving to Tennessee. And so I don't know, look for maybe some fire to happen in Tennessee. I don't know. Would anybody else like to add? So I think the sandbox idea is something that might have traction beyond today.
Yeah, and to that point, so we reached Kat's excellent idea of the sandbox by going from should there be a class in legal education that is around legal technology or legal engineering to should there be a whole revamping of the curriculum where legal technology underpins some of the doctrinal law in every single class to should we have a completely different model of legal education that includes the capability of actually challenging legal education. And Kat made a very nice point, which is that law is the operating system of our society, and as all of us know, operating systems have to be upgraded from time to time, and ours hasn't been upgraded in a long time. So one thing we didn't really come to a point of what can we do to take things away, but some of us were thinking afterwards, and in our group we had representatives or affiliates of Harvard Law, MIT, Vanderbilt, UPenn, Brooklyn Law, Cardozo, and LSE. So I think if all of us worked together towards a kind of sandbox idea, that actually gives us some, there you go, that gives us some actual power to potentially put something before the ABA.
The other point that you mentioned was to do with teaching students how to duplicate technology developed for A to J issues and challenges, so that students through legal accelerators in the curriculum would already be used to looking at existing solutions and building on them instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. And organizing access to justice hackathons at law schools so that students themselves can see real data about the community. 60% of X population is experiencing so-and-so. And so the role of organizations such as Legal Hackers is really key to help the students to engage with real data, have conversations outside the regular curriculum, and also galvanize that change.
Thank you. Hello? Maybe not. Just keep going? Okay, I'll just keep swimming. Hi everyone, thank you so much for your contribution. I wanted to know if this proposal would be something that would be in line with what you were thinking about. What if we thought about the license to practice law as fundamentally detached from a certain encyclopedic competence in academic pursuit of law and be tied solely to the specific skill sets to advise and argue on particular generic points of interest for a client. So for instance, you can say that you're able to draft a document that conveys interest for an individual or an entity as compared to a transfer value to another person. So it's, yes, you're drafting a contract, but it could also be a will, a letter of intention or whatever. And then after you're licensed in that skill capacity, you have, as part of your continuing legal education, you are certified as, I am currently competent in the practice of contracts, corporate governance, taxation, bankruptcy, so that if someone is dealing with you who is licensed to practice law, they know that they're dealing with someone who is also currently competent on that particular tangent that they're dealing with you on.
So,
first part.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Sure.
All right. So, they were kind of, I think there was more than one idea in there. The first thing that you were mentioning is relating to, is it possible to detach a kind of law license that relates to, I guess I'd say generally advocacy, as opposed to the curriculum and the corpus of law. like black letter law, bar exam law. Okay, and you're nodding. Let the record show he's nodding. And I think the answer is very definitely yes on that. And I know at MIT, for example, there are some people who are like brilliant advocates within like scientific debates, for example, where they don't need a license to practice law. They don't have a license to practice law, and they're doing very critical advocacy. And some of it relates to standards and to regulatory frameworks and to how we will organize society and what's within the what's sort of like within the Overton window, if you will. And so, but I think that would make a lot of sense. And one, discipline could be law, and then I would love to see some in science, and maybe even some for what reality is. When we see the news, or when we hold an election, for example. So I think that there's something but we can uniquely learn this from law. So if you look at the scientific method, for example, that really came together, I feel like, in the United Kingdom in like the 1700s and a little earlier, a lot of that came out of how litigation in courts of equity happened. Like, what is evidence? How do we know what we're going to deem is true? And various other things too. And so I think that we can help with that, and I think it can extend beyond the law as its own discipline. When you're getting into things relating to bodies of law like contract and antitrust in the second part of your question, I think I'm not going to bite at that part.
Thank you, Dazza. And I will just add that from my perspective, and I think this builds on the conversation we started today, we need multiple models of bringing people into the delivery of legal services. And so I think what you describe, separating from a formal kind of scholarly legal education, helping people with their legal problems, absolutely, we've got to figure out how to do that too. It's and. I don't think that falls within the legal education sandbox necessarily. I think that's more of the regulatory redesign question, which is equally important.
Any other questions?
I had a question about the sandbox idea. I was wondering if you guys had put any thoughts into jurisdictionally where you would want your sandbox, and I guess it's sort of a two-part question. Have you thought about country to country, and if it's in the U.S., have you thought state by state where you would want it to be? I'm sort of baking into that question the idea that are there other countries where this is maybe a bit more habitable, or like you could just sort of launch it today?
I'll respond real quickly. I think we discussed it as a U.S.-based, an idea being that it actually is a collaborative effort by a number of schools, so it doesn't necessarily live in a specific school. And I personally, this is me just giving my opinion, believe it needs to prepare a student to practice without respect to jurisdiction. And so a fundamental priority would be preparing someone to practice law, not preparing someone to pass the current bar exam, because those are two different things. So.
I was just going to add that, one of the challenges is, and Kat put an emphasis on this, it's like our egos a lot of times are in the way, and decentralizing those from the framework of reimagining this education, right? So really, how does this look in an engineer school? How does this look from other sectors? I think we all know what the results are today. You know, lack of access to justice, you know, poor well-being, depression, suicide, a lot of bad inputs with also the highest grossing year in profits. You know, so those are, you know, the inputs of legal education are producing these outputs. And so thinking about this from, you know, a disruptor incubate standpoint of like, how can we decentralize the power within the institution? And if that means students are not necessarily fulfilling the practice of law, but could be co-situated with someone that is very akin to the model you brought up, which has some semblance of the triple OT model and other regulatory reform models. But thinking about something that's scalable, something that is in competition with the current model. Law schools have no competition. It's just the law school. But there are defined avenues that have been proven to add value to both businesses, law firms, and you know, social impact organizations.
Regarding what you say, what the sandbox is about, also is like we as universities, or me as a professor, we work as a facilitator to interpret and learn the law. So then you can actually teach them how to get their hands dirty. We were talking about getting yourself dirty, right? To go to the client, to get to know them, get the insight, as what I was sharing before today in the morning, bring them to the classroom, and then construct this bridge in which you will learn the basis, the law, the skills, technological skills, and also build up this bridge in which the kid, the student, will have these skills, cognitive, managerial, communication, right? These studium generalis type of skills, right? In which, by legal design, they will get their hands also dirty and get to apply the law and these hardcore skills, let's say.
Just one thing to also address about jurisdiction. You know, for the most part, the jurisdiction issue is kind of a little arbitrary, right? Because let's just face it, you know, we're in a newer age that we can access the law that we need to much easier than we had to 100 years ago. So the sandbox would actually just kind of teach more on the practical skills, this the skill side of things, to be just a better practicing attorney. In that way, you know, you can say that you don't really need the portability. You know, you have states that have, in terms of jurisdiction, it's more like ethics issues or credit requirements, but not necessarily about the practice of the law itself.
So, I had a question on in the current state of what's happening right now in legal education. I teach at law school, and I find a lot of soon-to-be lawyers that are very interested in being legal designers or in being a legal operations manager, but they have like a strong pushback from the establishment, to call it, to say, well, how come you have studied like a whole career for doing law, and you first have to be a great lawyer, and then after that you can do what you want, no? So what's your take on that?
I think it just reconfirms the need, right? That, you know, we live in this kind of globalized, transformational society where, you know, businesses are working different. We work from home. We work across area codes, countries. That education hasn't kept up in ways other sectors have been able to rapidly innovate. One of the examples used was like the Google Tech kind of certificates that quickly train people around specific skills and connects them with employment opportunities. thinking about that from instances of, specific challenges like housing or, I think it's interesting, but it'll really have to not work within the system, but work. So it's hard, but I think legal hackers are uniquely positioned to be that bridge.
Just wanted to add, there's a reason why schools encourage traditional paths, and in the U.S. it's called U.S. News and World Reports. Where students go after law school figures heavily right into the school's rankings, and so JD required weighs more heavily than not, and so I think that I would conceive that a sandbox school would be free from those structures, and therefore create more openness and opportunity in that direction, which I think is growing. Interest is growing.
Yeah, what I wanted to add is also that we need to, it's me again, but okay. So this is what I do. I think that the main thing is to create trust. One of the main things that are intimidated about law school is that you need to look, speak, and be in a certain image, right? So the first thing is to create an environment of trust. So what I do with my students is this. Don't be afraid to have an opinion. Don't be afraid to have an input. And also, me as a teacher, I have to put these new skills into the syllabus or subjects that are already there in a traditional system, so they know that I'm not afraid, right? And then we both may be scared less. We can walk and go to the enterprise, get ourselves dirty, and build up this bridge. So the first thing is to be fearless, and second, to really have the ache of learning, I think.
There's no better way than So, once again, huge round of applause for the workshop organizers who spent a lot of time thinking about how to get these great conversations going. That was just awesome. You did a really, really good job. Thank you to everyone who participated so actively, contributing your expertise and your ideas. I really hope that these can turn into concrete proposals, things that can be implemented in chapters throughout the world and taken forward. I think these are really concrete, achievable goals. I really love the idea of the sandbox. I think it's super cool. But here's what we're going to do. There are two photos that I'd like to take. I'd like to get everybody on those stairs right there so that we can take one big group photo for everyone in the room. I think we can all fit. And then after that, I want to get the original Legal Hackers hackathon and chapter organizers, of which I'm not one. If you are one of those people, could you stand up, please? Let's just recognize the people who started this whole frickin' thing. Come on, Lauren, you started the chapter. Come on. Yeah. Julie. Yeah. In preparation for this, there were conversations about some of the early documents, and there was like a volunteer list from the day of like when different people who are in this room were gonna stop in with like their email check-ins and all of this, and going back through all the old original thinking about how this was put together as just an observer of the first hackathon was really, really powerful walk down memory lane. So with all of that, let's take the two photos. Let's all get organized on those stairs right there. We'll take the first one, and then we'll condense it down to the smaller group. If you are one of those original organizers, if you could stay toward the front, just in the first couple rows, that would be super helpful.
Should I do one that's candid as though I'm speaking? It's okay. That's fine.
Oh, yeah. No, it's good.
It's the quality of my phone.
Yeah, let's take one together.
Lena, can I ask you to... Thank you.
Wonderful.
Thank you. I'll just Photoshop it later.
Oh yeah, 2 minutes. That's great. Yeah, wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything. It was great.
Also, I can totally see how you are the global legal hackers coordinator.
Why?
You're
I just go and yell at people. That's all I do.
that's the hardest part.
Yelling and emailing, speaking of which. Hey, everyone. Everyone, look here. Here is the deal. I think there are 50 or fewer people in the room, which means everyone's coming to dinner. Dinner is at a place called Levant on Smith. It's a walk away, but it's a nice walk away. Before the dinner, we'll get drinks. I think the best place for us to go, provided there's space, I think we can make it work, is a place called Leanda. And Leanda, it's Mexican. They have like amazing like mezcal and tequila and margaritas and blah, blah, blah. If not, there are like 2 or 3 places right on that block, and we can just fill whatever. So if it's 2-pack, you don't feel comfortable, want to go somewhere else, it's all right there. But the dinner reservation is at 7:30. So I request that you are at Levant on Smith by 7:25. That way we can all. That's probably correct. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I won't go. It's fine. Is it really 51? No. Okay. Wonderful.